In this episode, we're going to talk a bit about some unknown or little known facts about the War of 1812. Now, when Americans hear the term the War of 1812, they usually think of, a couple of different things: the White House burning, the meaning of the Star Spangled Banner, and maybe even the song, the Battle of New Orleans, in 1814, etc. Talking about taking a little trip with Colonel Jackson down the mighty Mississippi. Anyhow, here's the problem with that. None of these issues explain why the war started. This wasn't a single issue conflict. It wasn't inevitable, and it definitely wasn't simple. The War of 1812 happened because everything was rubbing raw at once: commerce, honor, frontier fear, slavery, native resistance, and a young republic that was tired of being treated like a teenager begging to borrow the car. Tonight, we're not doing battles, we're doing causes and a few uncomfortable truths.
By 1812, Britain was locked in a death struggle with Napoleon Bonaparte. This wasn't a normal war. This was survival mode. Britain needed sailors. Britain needed blockades. Britain needed to choke France economically. And that meant stopping neutral trade, especially American trade. British patrols stopped American ships and forced American sailors to serve in the Royal Navy. Sometimes those sailors really were British deserters. Often they weren't from the American perspective. The message was brutal. Your citizenship doesn't count. Your papers don't matter. Your navy is too weak to stop us. But from Britain's perspective, we're fighting for the fate of Europe. Britain believed that it was critical to have a balance of power in Europe. Sorry about your feelings. Both sides were sincere. Both sides were incompatible.
Putting on my historian's hat, this is the part the textbooks glide past. Impressment wasn't just illegal, it was humiliating. Early Americans believed nations, just like people, could be shamed. They talked openly about insults, slights to honor and national dignity. So when British officers boarded American ships, it wasn't just economic pressure, it was an assault on status. And that left President James Madison with a brutal question: are we actually independent? Or are we just being tolerated, just pretending? Britain and France tried to blockade each other. Who got crushed in between? American merchants. Jefferson tried to avoid war with economic pressures through what he called the Embargo Act, which outlawed any trade between the US and all European countries. It backfired spectacularly. Ports stagnated, farmers couldn't export, smuggling exploded, New England almost threatened to succeed. See our pre Civil War secession attempts podcast to look at that. But by 1812, economic pain had turned into political rage. And rage, historically, always looks for a target.
Yeah, this is the part here that we're going to get into that really matters and often gets brushed aside. The frontier was already on fire. Britain supported native resistance in the Northwest. And from the American perspective, British forts supplied weapons. British agents encouraged resistance. British Canada looked like a launch pad for raids.
And from the native perspective, the United States was swallowing land at a terrifying pace. Leaders like Tecumseh were not British puppets. They were just fighting for survival. Tecumseh's vision was radical. No individual tribes selling land. Collective resistance, a permanent barrier to American expansion. British officials did not invent this resistance, but they did recognize something useful when they saw it.
The war hawks, Canada, and wishful thinking. Meanwhile, a new generation had entered Congress not connected with the founding fathers of the creation of the country. They were younger, louder, less patient. They believed three things. Britain only respected force. Canada was lightly defended. It was a matter of marching, to quote Daniel Webster. And expansion was national destiny. This wasn't a universal idea, but it was very influential. And let's be honest, there was more than a little overconfidence. Marching into Canada, like marching into Russia or Afghanistan, always looks easier on a map.
You got that one right, Dr. Deneen.
The war inside the war. Now, if the War of 1812 had a man who could fight a battle by day, however sloppily, and undermine his own country by night, it was James Wilkinson, the senior United States Army general, former governor of Louisiana Territory, and yes, for many years, a paid agent of the Spanish crown. See our Aaron Burr podcast to explore that issue. He was the closest ally of Aaron Burr until betrayal became convenient. Wilkinson had been bought off, and he managed a very rare skill. He kept failing just badly enough to survive and go upward.
Yeah, in 1813, Wilkinson commanded the American effort to capture Montreal via the St. Lawrence River. It was ambitious and it collapsed. At the Battle of Chrysler's Farm, he stayed ill and indecisive. He issued no clear plan. He let subordinates fight blind. The result was a humiliating defeat. The campaign died. Whether incompetence or quiet sabotage, the effect was the same. Wilkinson didn't lose the war, but he ensured it would be messy, costly, and inconclusive.
Let's turn our focus now to the burning of Washington and the use of humiliation as a tactic here. So, why exactly did the British burn Washington? Retaliation, signaling opportunity. Earlier, Americans had burned York, which was modern Toronto. So, when British forces entered Washington in 1814, they targeted the Capitol, the White House, federal buildings, not homes, not churches. This was what you would call controlled destruction.
Washington was militarily useless, but symbolically perfect. Burning, it said, you cannot defend your capital. This war is not going as planned. Britain didn't want to destroy or recolonize the United States. They wanted leverage. Once their message was delivered, they withdrew.
Yeah, Britain had a concrete war aim most Americans never learn about. A Native American buffer state, in their opinion, between the US and Canada would ensure some closure on that issue. This wasn't charity, it was a balance of power thinking. A permanent barrier would protect Canada, slow US expansion, and prevent American continental dominance.
And this plan was real, but it failed because Tecumseh was killed. The U.S. flatly refused. Britain's priorities shifted after Napoleon's defeat. Native nations were not invited to the peace table, and they paid the highest price. Now let's talk about black soldiers, freedom, and fear. Britain offered freedom to enslaved people who escaped to British lines. Those men became the colonial marines. They were trained, they were armed, and they fought well. And they terrified American leaders.
Because here's the paradox. The United States also relied on African Americans, free and slave, just without promising freedom to those who were enslaved. Early leaders, General Hull, General Dearborn, even Andrew Jackson himself with his Iron Brigade, they allowed free people and slaves to fight with them. Black soldiers, sailors, and laborers were essential everywhere. Free people were treated pretty well. But emancipation to the enslaved, it had happened on a small scale in the Revolution. But here, no.
At sea, the rules were quite different. The U.S. Navy openly recruited free black sailors. They served in integrated crews, earned equal pay, and were judged by competence, not skin color. On ships like the USS Constitution, black soldiers weren't an exception, they were normal.
This wasn't a moral enlightenment, it was a political necessity. The Navy proved what politicians refused to admit. African Americans could serve even as officers without social or societal collapse, and that truth scared people on land. So, why did the United States go to war? Because trade was strangled, sailors were seized, the frontiers were bleeding, and national pride was wounded. No single cause lit the fuse, but together it felt unbearable.
The War of 1812 didn't solve most of these problems, but it did something quieter and more important. It convinced Britain and Americans that the United States was here to stay.
Sometimes wars aren't about winning. Sometimes they're about being taken seriously. And that, quietly, was the actual real cause for the War of 1812.
That's something you probably didn't know. If you want more information, folks, see the video series First Invasion or Pierre Brenton's two-volume series Invasion of Canada and Flames Across the Border. We could talk about this forever, but we're going to pack it in for now. Please come back soon. We really enjoy this. Many wonderful things coming up. Leave us a like and comments.
Goodbye for now.
Goodbye, stay curious, and always look for the truth.